They gave him a dry roll and a plastic cup of water. That was his first-class meal. No entry, no silverware, no apology, just silence and a tray that screamed, "You don't belong here." Renato Cruz didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. He took one look at the food, then pulled out his phone, tapped a secure app, and quietly began setting off a chain reaction that would freeze $1. $4 billion across the entire airline industry. Tell us where you're watching from, because what happens next changed airline policy worldwide. 37,000 feet above the Mediterranean, Skyline Airways Flight 227 glided through a sea of clouds. The first-class cabin was quiet, polished, and expensive, the kind of silence people pay 5 figures for. A glass clinked. A laugh from a man in 1D. Another refill of Dom Perignon. Renato Cruz didn't look up. He was seated by the window in 1A, wearing a simple navy travel sweater and slacks. No designer labels. No Rolex. His skin was brown, his hair silvering, and his face carried the calm stillness of someone who had learned, long ago, that silence was power. To most on this flight, he looked like someone who'd been upgraded by accident. Maybe a frequent flyer burned through. Maybe a rich man's assistant. No one suspected he controlled the very infrastructure that made their luxury possible. And in about an hour, they would... Dinner service began with showmanship. "Mr. Langston, would you prefer the filet or the sea bass?" The flight attendant asked sweetly. He smirked. "Filet. Rare. Like my luck," she laughed. "Too long. Too loud." Her name tag read Cassandra. Tall, blonde, perfectly polished. She moved through the cabin like a performance, warm for some, professional for others. And then she reached Renato's row, except she didn't greet him, didn't make eye contact. She simply placed a tray in front of him and said, "Here, on it, a dry white roll and a plastic cup of water. That's it." No main course, no napkin, no explanation. Renato stared at the tray. "I believe I requested the sea bass," he said evenly. Cassandra's smile returned, but this one didn't reach her eyes. "This is what's available for you tonight." "Sir!" She turned and walked away. From 2 rows back, someone snorted. Quiet laughter followed. Renato didn't respond. He didn't touch the food. He simply opened the leather folio on his lap, removed a slim black device, and placed it on the tray beside the bread. His fingers moved with precision. 3 taps, a scan, a quiet chime. The screen lit up. Global Loyalty Ethics Index Console. User. Cruz. RAR. Final authority. Airline. Skyline Airways. Route. EU Gulf. Trigger. Pending. He tapped in one line of code. Flag. Ethics risk. Level 3. Reason. Service discrimination. First class. Asian passenger. He didn't submit it. Not yet. Instead, he picked up the bread and broke it in half. Not to eat it, just to look. The inside was dry, cold, unevenly baked. He thought of his mother. Batangas. Philippines. Summer. 1982. She had stood at the airport, ticket in hand, suitcase packed, hair combed, clothes ironed. And yet, she never made it on the plane. "You don't look like someone flying international," the gate agent had told her. "We need to verify your documents." She waited 3 hours. She missed the flight. She never made it to her son's graduation. Renato had waited outside the university auditorium, scanning every crowd for her face. She wasn't there. She never flew again. Back on flight 227, Cassandra passed him again, this time with chocolate cake and espresso. She stopped at every seat, skipped him again. Renato looked around. Everyone else had been served. Everyone. He reached for his phone and sent a message to Maya, his chief of staff. "Prep GLEI Protocol 9. Freeze all redemptions for Skyline Airways and affiliated platforms. 72 Global Hold. Confirm activation upon arrival." A moment later, "Confirmed. Standing by." Another attendant approached, shorter, younger, uncertain. "Mr. Cruz?" she asked, glancing down nervously. Renato looked up. "Would you like anything else? Perhaps dessert?" He glanced at her badge. Amanda. New. She wasn't part of it. "I'm fine," he said gently. "But thank you." She gave a small, grateful nod and moved on. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "We'll begin our descent into Dubai shortly. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Cassandra finally returned. This time, she had a folded napkin and a new tone of voice, soft. "Syrupy, Mr. Cruz," she said, placing a small dessert plate before him. There was a catering error earlier. "Please accept this as an apology." He didn't look at the cake. He looked at her. "Do you serve all mistakes this way?" he asked. Calm and low, she blinked. "Sir, because I think the mistake wasn't the food." He folded the napkin back over the plate and pushed it aside. "I'd prefer to keep the original tray," he said. "For documentation." Cassandra's smile collapsed. Her hand trembled slightly. She picked up the tray without a word and backed away. Renato turned his gaze back to the window. Dubai was a blanket of golden lights now, stretching like a galaxy beneath them. He closed his eyes, not in anger, in certainty. They had served him bread and water. He would serve them reform, and the entire industry would feel it by morning. The wheels touched down with a soft thud. Skyline Airways Flight 227 rolled along the tarmac of Dubai International Airport as if nothing unusual had happened. The cabin lights brightened, seatbelts clicked. Passengers stretched and reached for bags, but nothing about this landing was normal. At least, not for Skyline, and definitely not for Cassandra. The blonde flight attendant stood near the galley, one hand still gripping a tray, the other nervously scrolling her phone just out of view. Her lips moved slightly as if rehearsing a sentence. Her eyes flicked toward seat 1A and quickly away. Renato Cruz hadn't moved. He remained seated, relaxed but composed, his folio neatly packed, his face unreadable. He watched the front of the cabin with the quiet patience of a man who had already taken every step. Because he had. Behind him, someone muttered about a missed connection. Another tapped a laptop angrily, trying to check an update. Flight Wi-Fi was down, or slow, or something. Renato's phone buzzed softly. Maya. Lockdown confirmed. GLEI Trigger 9 in full effect. Public dashboards updating in 60 seconds. He exhaled once, silent, then stood. By the time the aircraft reached Gate 14 and the door opened, the effect had already begun. In a quiet conference room in Zurich, 3 mid-level risk managers at SkyPass Alliance stared in disbelief at their screens. Red banners flashed across the top of their dashboards. Ethics Risk Alert, Level 3 GLEI. Target, Skyline Airways. Loyalty redemption function suspended. Within 90 seconds, similar alerts popped up at Crystalis, Emirates One, Asia Fly Plus, and Miles Club Global. The phone started ringing. Call centers buzzed. Flight upgrades disappeared. And across 6 continents, passengers began asking one question. Why can't I use my points? Inside Dubai Airport's private arrivals lounge, a young woman in a crisp black suit waited just past immigration. Her earpiece buzzed nonstop, but her face remained calm. This was Maya Reyes, Chief of Staff to Renato Cruz. She'd been with him for 12 years, long enough to know when to prepare water and when to prepare fire. "Welcome back, sir," she said as Renato entered the lounge. "The room is ready. Anyone else here yet?" he asked. "Skyline's CEO just landed. He's on his way." And Cassandra, her brow arched slightly. "She'll know why she's here," Renato replied. They walked together down a quiet corridor lined with frosted glass walls and soft recessed lights. At the end, 2 security guards flanked a mahogany door. Inside, a glass-walled boardroom, seats for 8. 2 screens already displaying live updates from GLEI. $4 billion in loyalty point value was now frozen across 4 major alliances. Maya handed Renato a printed folder. Passenger complaints from Skyline over the past 3 years, sorted by ethnicity. 74% of unresolved cases involved passengers of Asian, Middle Eastern, or African descent. Renato scanned it. Any overlap with Cassandra's flights? Maya nodded. 6. 5 had written complaints. 2 were downgraded without cause. Renato closed the folder. Then today wasn't an isolated incident, he said. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. Richard Holt, CEO of Skyline Airways, entered, his breath a little fast. He looked more like a stockbroker than an airline executive. Sharp suit, cufflinks, and eyes that flicked constantly, looking for advantage. "Renato," he said, forcing a smile. "Quite the surprise to find out you were on board. I had no idea you'd finalized the Crystalis deal." Renato gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." "Richard, we'll skip the small talk." Holt sat. The tension in the room coiled like wire. Renato tapped the tablet in front of him. The screen behind him displayed a real-time map. 82 flights delayed. 46 upgrades blocked. $1. 4B suspended. "Do you know what this is?" Renato asked calmly. Holt blinked. "It's your system." "It's the system," Renato corrected. "And right now, your airline is marked as an ethics risk level 3. Richard shifted in his seat. "I've already been told about the freeze. We've reached out to the platforms, but they haven't responded." "They won't," Maya said. "Until you sign this." She slid a second folder across the table. "Passenger Ethics Mandate, Full Compliance Charter. Author, R. Cruz. Global Loyalty Ethics Index." Holt opened it, his lips thinned. "This is extensive. It was proposed 7 years ago," Renato said, leaning back. "You were at the table when it was first introduced. You voted against it." "I remember," Richard admitted. "We thought it was too aggressive." "Too prescriptive." "No," Renato said. "You thought it was inconvenient." The room fell still. Outside the conference room, passengers in Dubai were lining up at customer service desks, demanding answers. Screens displayed delays. Mobile apps glitched. Social media began to boil. Loyalty freeze. Ethics in the air. Bread and water. Someone had already posted a blurry photo from Flight 227 of the tray Renato received. The caption read, "First class meal. Billionaire passenger." This is how it starts. The story was spreading. And Cassandra. She sat in an unmarked waiting room down the hall, staring at a bottled water she couldn't open. The irony not lost on her. Back in the boardroom, Richard sighed. "Let me be clear. What happened to you should never have happened. I'll issue an apology. This isn't about me," Renato said quietly. "This is about your system. A system where passengers of color are repeatedly misclassified, mistreated, and ignored, and it's tolerated." He paused, then slid a single photo across the table. A Filipino woman in her late 50s stood outside an airport terminal, tears streaming down her face. "My mother," Renato said softly. "Manila. 1980 ticket in hand. Valid visa. Denied boarding because she didn't look like someone traveling international." Richard stared at the photo. "She missed my graduation, never flew again, never trusted the system that humiliated her. Today, your crew gave me bread and water. I can't force people to respect me, but I can make damn sure they don't do that to the next me." Richard lowered his eyes. Then he reached for the pen. "I'll sign." But Renato held up a hand. "There's more." He turned to Maya, who handed over a second document. "These are your next steps. Mandatory ethics training for all cabin crew. Quarterly audits by GLEI. Full publication of your resolution stats by ethnicity. A public statement accepting responsibility, not just for this incident, but for the pattern." Richard hesitated. "You want me to admit institutional bias. I want you to admit reality," Renato said. A long silence followed. Then he signed. As they stood to leave, Maya's phone buzzed again. She showed Renato the screen. Crystalis just reported 3 other airlines reached out. They want to begin GLEI integration voluntarily. Renato smiled. "It begins." Outside, in the terminal, Cassandra watched the gate agents apologize to confused passengers, watched security escort one of her crew out for aggressive behavior toward an elderly Arab man, watched the system shift slowly. Yes, but publicly. Her chest tightened. Not in fear, in shame. For the first time, she understood. This wasn't about a meal. It never had been. That evening, as the sun dipped over Singapore, the Crystalis tower lit up. Renato stood by his office window, staring out at the water. His phone buzzed, a text from Maya. "Ethics mandate signed. Press asking for comments." He replied with a single sentence. "Let the system speak for itself." And he turned back toward the city, silent. Steady. Like bamboo, Batangas. Philippines. 1971. The morning rain had just cleared. The narrow alleyways still glistened from the downpour, and the scent of wet earth lingered in the air. Palm trees swayed gently as a small boy followed behind a woman in worn sandals and a pressed white blouse. Renato was 9. His backpack, tied together with twine, bounced against his back as he tried to match his mother's steady steps. "Walk straight," she would always say. "Head up. They don't need to see money. They just need to see you're not afraid." Lucia Cruz wasn't rich, but she had dignity. She taught elementary literature and ethics at the village school and believed that manners were a form of quiet power. She never raised her voice, never taught Renato to retaliate. But when someone cut in front of her at the market or called her names because of her accent or shoes, she would pause, breathe, and say just one word, "Noted." Then she kept walking. Renato didn't understand that when he was a boy. He hated it when classmates laughed, when they were ignored in line, when the grocer pretended not to see them. "Why don't you fight back?" "Ma," he asked once, tears in his eyes. Lucia knelt, wiped his cheek, and whispered, "Because we fight different. We build, not break. And when we build strong enough, they can never break us again." He didn't realize that the idea for a global ethics system was born that day, right there on a dusty sidewalk outside a corner store where a man refused to sell his mother rice, saying, "Come back when you can pay." When Renato was 13, his mother received an invitation to a national teachers conference in Manila. It was the first time she would ever travel by plane. He remembered her standing in front of the mirror, buttoning up her best blouse like it was an evening gown. She smiled as she fixed her hair. 3 days later, she came home, eyes swollen, voice hoarse, posture slightly sunken. "Ma," he asked. Lucia shook her head. "I had my ticket, my visa, everything," she said. "They saw me, looked at my face, told me to step aside. Then they just stopped calling names." She waited 4 hours at the gate before turning back home. Renato didn't sleep that night. Not because he was angry. He was used to being angry. But because he felt small, smaller than he'd ever felt. And that night, on a sheet of grid paper, he didn't draw airplanes or terminals. He drew a scoring system, an accountability chart, a world where every behavior had a record. At the top, in careful pencil, "No one can erase dignity here." Years later, Renato earned a scholarship to National University of Singapore NUS. He studied computer science, but spent late nights reading about corporate behavior, systems theory, and airline reward structures. Other students were coding apps. Renato was still thinking about that cold airport gate and the woman who never boarded. In 1989, he was hired as a technical consultant for Miles Trust, one of Asia's first cross-airline loyalty platforms. But early on, he noticed a disturbing pattern. White passengers were 30% more likely to receive upgrades than Asian travelers with identical point levels. Complaints were logged without racial identifiers. No audit trail, no accountability, no correction. He flagged the issue, but they shrugged it off. "This isn't about race," one executive told him. "It's just business," Renato replied. "No, it's about which faces your system rewards." He quietly walked away from the project, and 3 years later, with 3 fellow Filipinos, he launched his own startup, Cruz Holdings. The company began small, just a digital platform for users to view point balances and file feedback. But in 1996, after a European airline faced global backlash for ejecting a black veteran from first class, Cruz Holdings was asked to consult. That's when Renato introduced the world to GLEI, Global Loyalty Ethics Index. Every rule he wrote wasn't built by engineers. It was written by the son of Lucia Cruz. Any crew member with 3 or more misconduct complaints would trigger a review. Airlines marked as non-compliant would lose access to cross-program upgrades. The final override, only one person held it, Renato. GLEI was rejected 4 times. Airlines didn't want ethics baked into profit, but Renato refused to remove it. At a 2015 conference, he said, "I'm not trying to sell you this. I'm giving you time to realize it's inevitable." He was right. By 2020, a viral clip of a flight attendant dragging a crying woman off a plane forced 3 platforms to adopt GLEI in trial mode. By 2024, 2 more followed. And in 2025, on that plane from Rome to Dubai, when Cassandra served him bread and water, she wasn't just disrespecting a man. She was waking a system that had waited 40 years. That evening, back in Singapore, Renato stood by his office window. overlooking the harbor. The water shimmered with the orange-pink glow of dusk. Ferry boats moved slowly toward Batangas, the town where it all began. Maya entered, holding a tablet. Skyline signed the full mandate, she said. 17 partners received the updated charter. 2 more have asked to integrate GLEI. Renato didn't say a word. He walked to his desk, opened a bottom drawer, and pulled out an old envelope. The edges were frayed. The paper smelled of dust and memory. On the front, in delicate cursive, to Renato, when you feel small, build something no one can tear down. Mom. The video wasn't meant to go viral. It started as a blurry clip taken from row 6A, showing a first-class meal tray with just bread, 1 butter packet, and a small bottle of water. The camera tilted toward the man sitting silently in 1A, gray hair. Glasses, tailored suit. No outrage, no protest. He simply pushed the tray back, nodded slightly, and resumed reading. The clip was titled, "This is what they served a billionaire Filipino CEO in first class." By the next morning, it had 7 million views. Wait, that's Renato Cruz. Reddit exploded. Twitter lit up. TikTok users dissected every frame. A travel influencer stitched the video with a breakdown. Y'all don't understand. This man literally built the ethics platform that airlines use. His system controls over 70% of loyalty networks in Southeast Asia. He doesn't need to shout. He just needs to press a button. Another added, he's the one who created GLEI. Right. Global Loyalty Ethics Index. That thing airlines are terrified of. Hashtags began trending. Bread and Power. Renato Cruz. GLEI freeze. Passenger dignity now. Meanwhile, inside Skyline Airways Dubai HQ, CEO Marta Eriksson had just landed from Oslo. Her assistant handed her a tablet, already pulled up with CNN's live coverage. This morning, the Filipino billionaire and ethics architect Renato Cruz reportedly flagged Skyline Airways with a Category 1 ethics risk, the highest in the Global Loyalty Ethics Index. As a result, redemptions and cross-network upgrades have been frozen across 4 major loyalty platforms, impacting up to $4 billion in point value. Marta turned pale. Get Cruz on the phone, now. Back in Singapore, Renato was already in his home office, a quiet room filled with wooden bookshelves and old maps of the Visayas region. He wasn't watching the news. He was reviewing passenger ethics incident reports flagged by GLEI in the past 48 hours. There were 14 new submissions across 5 airlines, all from first-class passengers who had been ignored, insulted, or denied service. One file in particular stood out. A pregnant woman of color was asked to step aside and wait for an open economy seat, even though she held a first-class ticket. No apology, no explanation. Renato leaned back in his chair. It's starting, he murmured. The phone buzzed. Marta Eriksson, CEO, Skyline. Renato answered with a calm, "Good afternoon." Marta didn't waste time. Renato, "Listen, I don't know what happened on that flight, but I want to personally apologize. Whatever you need, compensation, private statement, upgraded catering policy, it's yours." Renato replied, slow and firm. "I don't want a statement. I want your systems audited, your crew retrained, your frontline leadership replaced." There was a pause. "That's a tall order," she said. "Give me a week." He didn't blink. "You have 48 hours. Or GLEI escalates to Category 2. Then you're locked out of global reward exchanges for 30 days. Hours later, Marta convened an emergency executive meeting with her board. The legal chief warned, a full GLEI shutdown will freeze not only point transfers, it will trigger a chain reaction with our European banking partners. These points are collateralized, the CFO added. Preliminary loss projection, $612 million in deferred value over 2 weeks. The chairman slammed his hand on the table. This all started over a tray of bread. Everyone turned toward the HR director. She shrank in her seat. We had prior complaints about that crew member. She wasn't disciplined. By 9:00 p.m., internal memos were flying. Skyline's VP of in-flight operations resigned. Cassandra, the flight attendant, was suspended indefinitely. A third-party ethics firm was hired to conduct a full crew audit. At midnight, Marta signed a document titled, Passenger Dignity Mandate, Full GLEI Compliance. But the story didn't stop there. across the globe. CEOs from 7 airlines scheduled an emergency video call, led by David Levine, head of North Sky Alliance, one of the largest global airline groups. I spoke to Marta. David began. Renato's not playing. He's enforcing the mandate. One exec asked, "Can we negotiate?" Another said, "Can we build an alternative to GLEI?" Silence. Then David replied, "You think anyone will trust a loyalty system built by the same airlines they no longer trust?" They all knew the answer. Meanwhile, media outlets kept digging. Bloomberg reported that Cruise Holdings had flagged 4 additional airlines for repeated ethics violations in the past 6 months. Most had quietly settled. One had tried to suppress the report and faced a 9% drop in stock value when it leaked. BBC World ran a primetime interview with Maya, Cruise Holdings' chief compliance officer. The point of GLEI isn't to punish, it's to restore accountability. Airlines have forgotten that loyalty isn't earned by upgrades. It's earned by how you treat people when no one is watching. As the world kept watching, something unexpected happened. Passengers began posting their own stories under the tag "My First Class Moment." One wrote, "They told my dad he didn't belong in business class because of his shoes. That was 3 years ago. No apology to this day." Another shared, "My mom was offered peanuts while everyone else had steak. They assumed she couldn't read English. She has a PhD." These stories flooded social feeds. GLEI added a new public portal, Passenger Ethics Tracker. Submit your own report. Within 24 hours, it received 93,000 entries. At sunrise, Renato sat by the window again. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just opened the dashboard, looked at the GLEI pulse data, and saw a small notification. Skyline Airways. Full compliance. Category downgraded. Monitoring continues. He clicked acknowledge. Then he whispered, "Noted." Dubai International Airport. Gate C11. The check-in line for Skyline Airways Flight 738 to Zurich was unusually quiet. Not because passengers were calm, but because something felt off. People whispered. Phones buzzed. By the far window, a middle-aged black couple stood clutching their passports. The wife wore a pale yellow blazer. The husband adjusted his tie, eyes scanning the gate agents behind the counter. "Excuse me," he said politely. "We were just rebooked to first class after the last flight was canceled. We have the confirmation." The agent, a tall woman with a tight ponytail, barely glanced up. "Sir, I don't see you on the upgrade list. Please step aside." He showed her the app. She waved it off. Behind him, a young Indian woman in business attire leaned over. "Ma'am, I got the same thing. I also have confirmation. This isn't okay." The agent clicked her pen, sighed, and said what she had no idea would end her career. "You people always think you deserve more than what you pay for." Dead silence. 3 phones came up, cameras rolled. Just then, a ground supervisor rushed over, phone to her ear. Her name tag read Farah Malik, duty lead. She whispered to the agent. The woman froze. Her eyes darted across the line, which was now recording from 5 different angles. Farah turned to the passengers. "I'm very sorry for the delay. Please allow us just a moment to re-verify everything." She motioned the black couple and the Indian woman to the side and personally reissued new boarding passes. Row 1A, 1B, and 2A. The gate agent didn't say another word. The crowd, however, had started murmuring loudly. "This again. How many people has Skyline done this to? Wasn't that the same airline from the viral video?" A young man in cargo pants turned to the camera, live streaming on his phone. "Yo, I think we just saw the second round of GLEI violations. In real time, 30 minutes later, inside the terminal VIP lounge, Skyline's interim HR executive, Callum Price, was on his laptop trying to finalize the crisis memo. He hadn't even finished the subject line when a CNN alert popped up on his screen. Breaking. Skyline Airways faces second passenger incident as video surfaces at Dubai Airport. Another ethics risk flag. Under review by GLEI. Callum cursed under his breath. He hadn't even wrapped the fallout from the Renato Cruz incident. The PR team was still drafting a statement for that. His phone buzzed again. It was Marta Eriksson. "You saw it?" she asked. "Live," he muttered. GLEI's public dashboard just showed a second flag. This time, The crew didn't even make it on the plane yet. What do you want to do? Her voice dropped cold. Scrub everyone tied to that gate. I don't care if we have to delay 3 flights. Pull them all and notify legal. And Callum, no cover-ups. Not anymore. Meanwhile, on board Flight 738, the mood was tense. The new crew had been briefed. Most of them had joined just last month and were brought in to refresh the company's image. But now, passengers weren't just watching safety demonstrations, they were watching the staff. Every word, every expression. Row 2B, an older Filipino man in a charcoal gray suit, sat silently, reading Business Week. Someone had placed a small note on his seat before he arrived. Thank you for changing everything. He didn't flinch, didn't smile, just folded the note and tucked it into his breast pocket. Back at HQ, the internal Slack channels were melting down. One flight coordinator wrote, "Just got off the Zurich crew roster. The AI assignment flagged the whole team for prior complaints. How did that get missed?" Another replied, "HR purged the tags 6 months ago to reduce turnover. No one updated the flagging system." That message was screen capped. 10 minutes later, it was leaked to Twitter. Now, the airline wasn't just facing ethics violations. They were facing willful data suppression. At the same time, passengers around the world began to test the system. One woman in San Diego booked a first-class ticket just to see how she'd be treated. A Ghanaian businessman in Paris boarded wearing a body camera. They weren't angry. They were collecting receipts. In New York, at JFK Terminal 4, 3 GLEI certified ethics monitors, usually anonymous, data-facing consultants, were visibly present, clipboard in hand. Skyline's senior flight manager on site approached them nervously. "Are you doing a spot check?" One of them, a quiet woman with silver-streaked hair, replied, "Passenger dignity isn't just about how you act during flight. It's how you hire, how you train, and how you repair trust inside the company." Employees began speaking up. A junior flight attendant posted anonymously, "We reported Cassandra 5 times last year. She mocked passengers with accents, falsified seating preferences. Nothing happened. Leadership didn't care until a billionaire made a phone call." Another wrote, "I'm proud Renato Cruz didn't scream or yell. He just used the system he built. Maybe now they'll listen to the rest of us." At 4:37 p.m., Skyline's internal portal posted an announcement. Effective immediately, all frontline staff involved in the Dubai C-11 incident have been placed on leave pending third-party review. The update ended with a sentence that stunned many. Passenger dignity is not a slogan. It is now a condition of employment. Later that night, Renato Cruz received a message from Maya. "Second flag processed. Skyline accepted. Media asking for comment." He typed a reply, then paused. After a moment, he wrote back, "Let the story speak first. The system will follow." He shut the laptop, walked to his mother's framed photo by the window, and whispered, "You were right, Ma. We don't fight loud. We fight right." The headlines shifted. From outrage to resistance. From airline ethics violated to, was the Filipino CEO too harsh? From passengers speak out to, is one man too powerful? It started with an op-ed in the Financial Ledger, written by a former airline executive. Ethics reform is noble, but no single man should control systems that freeze billions in value overnight. The GLEI platform lacks proper oversight, and Renato Cruz, while brilliant, must be held accountable for acting as judge, jury, and executioner. By noon, it was reposted on LinkedIn with over 40,000 shares. 3 hours later, a PR firm linked to Unity Alliance, an airline coalition based in Brussels, launched a full campaign across Europe. Passenger dignity can't be dictated by one person. Is your loyalty data being weaponized? Transparency over tyranny. Time to audit GLEI. They didn't attack Renato directly. They attacked the system he built. Inside Cruz Holdings, the staff had seen it coming. Maya walked into Renato's office carrying a thick folder. "Lobbying pressure's climbing," she said. "We've confirmed 4 European CEOs just hired a firm in D.C. to push for a congressional review of our system." Renato didn't look surprised. "What's the narrative?" he asked. "They're painting it as overreach, claiming we destabilized 4 airline economies, spun it into anti-Asian bias under the radar." He closed the file, took off his glasses, then said, calmly, "Let them come." Across the Atlantic, In Washington, D.C., a private dinner was hosted by the Airline Futures Council, attended by a mix of senators, aviation execs, and consultants over bourbon and seared steak. One senator asked, "You're telling me a guy in Singapore shut down the loyalty systems of 4 major carriers just because he didn't get a proper meal?" The North Sky COO leaned forward, eyes narrow. He triggered a freeze because our systems failed a dignity protocol he invented. But the truth is, we don't control the platform. He does? A lobbyist chimed in. We don't need to defeat him, just regulate him. Discredit the index. Force a joint governance model. They all raised glasses. Renato didn't attend conferences, didn't go on TV, didn't tweet, but the system spoke for him. And that was the problem. Back in Singapore, Renato and his small team prepared a white paper. Title: Passenger Dignity as Infrastructure, a legal framework for ethical loyalty systems. It outlined 3 core ideas. Passenger dignity is not a courtesy. It is a right tied to financial value. Loyalty systems are financial instruments and must be held to ethical standards. Ethics audits must be independent, not industry-controlled. Within 48 hours, the document was downloaded 312,000 times by regulators, journalists, and curious professionals. Meanwhile, at Skyline Airways HQ, Marta Erickson faced internal chaos. One executive stormed out of a meeting yelling, "We're not a company anymore. We're a case study." The general counsel warned Marta, "If Cruise keeps pushing this mandate forward, we'll have to choose. Comply or risk delisting from every major loyalty platform by year's end." Marta leaned back in her chair, exhausted. She had fought mergers, strikes, lawsuits, but she had never fought a man who refused to fight back in public, yet dismantled you one policy at a time. That same night, on a quiet rooftop in Manila, Renato met with 2 unexpected visitors, Senator Althea Ramos, who chaired the Philippine Committee on Digital Infrastructure, and Jean-Michel Dubois, a transport ethics negotiator from the EU Commission. Senator Ramos was the first to speak. "I read your mandate. It's airtight, but if you want this global, it needs ratification, fast." Renato nodded. "I'm not pushing this to punish airlines. I'm doing it because every mother who was ever humiliated in silence deserves something permanent." Jean-Michel tapped the table. "We'll propose it at the Geneva summit next quarter. But you need you. See, traction." Renato turned to Maya. "Get me a meeting with the FAA and 2 senators. Quietly. No press." In New York, The Atlantic ran a long-form profile titled "The Quiet Storm." How one Filipino CEO is redefining power in the skies. The piece described his backstory, his system, and how he never raised his voice, but the room always changed after he spoke. It ended with this quote, "You don't need to shout to shut down injustice. You just need to be heard in the right frequency." Of course, not everyone was moved. A new scandal broke. 2 airlines had quietly scrubbed GLEI flags from their loyalty systems. Both were caught. Both had their platform suspended for 72 hours. The market lost confidence. Stock dropped. Passengers posted screenshots, booked a flight, got downgraded, called them out. "They deleted my ticket history. Guess who still had a copy?" Renato didn't respond. GLEI did. At the next board meeting of the International Aviation Ethics Coalition, something unprecedented happened. 7 airlines formally submitted letters agreeing to adopt the passenger ethics mandate. The first time in history, ethics standards would be required for loyalty platforms across 3 continents. Among the signatories, Skyline Airways. In a quiet hallway outside the chamber, Marta Erickson and Renato finally crossed paths. She extended her hand. "You could have destroyed us completely." He took it, gently. That was never the goal. She looked down, then back up. "So what is?" he replied. "Accountability, quietly enforced. So no one else has to do what I did." Then walked away. At 6:42 a.m. in Geneva, the first domino fell. Silverjet Airways, a high-end European carrier known for its elitist boutique luxury branding, was hit with a leaked internal recording. In it, a VP of guest experience said, without a hint of hesitation, if they look like they can't afford it, downgrade them quietly. "We don't want certain optics in our premier lounges." The internet exploded, but this time, no one waited for PR statements. GLEI flagged them in under 4 minutes. Within the hour, $20 million in rewards, point redemptions froze. 4 major airport lounges suspended Silverjet access. Their loyalty app was delisted from Apple and Google Play. One user posted, "Tried to access my Silverjet status. Got service unavailable. Guess ethics load faster than their servers." Renato Cruz didn't gloat. He was in Brussels, presenting a closed-door briefing to the EU Passenger Rights Commission. He clicked through his slides calmly. No flashy transitions, just evidence. Ethics breaches by Tier 3. Loyalty value manipulated via bias. Downgrade patterns tied to profiling. When he finished, one commissioner asked, "Mr. Cruz, what you've built is more powerful than some government oversight bodies. What do you propose next?" Renato didn't hesitate. Universal enforcement. A binding charter, not based on feelings, but data. Ethics audits. And system flags. If airlines want trust, they must accept that trust now has terms. Silence. Then applause. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., another ripple formed. The FAA officially endorsed the passenger ethics mandate as a framework for EU-based loyalty programs. That meant airlines who failed GLEI standards could be denied federal route subsidies. Passenger complaints would now feed directly into GLEI scoring. Loyalty programs had to offer ethics transparency in their terms of service. The move shocked industry analysts. One CNBC commentator said, "We're witnessing the creation of a new pillar in air travel, ethics as infrastructure." But not everyone celebrated. In a desperate move, a rival airline alliance known as Skylink Partners tried to counter-program. They launched a loyalty program with a different tagline: excellence, not entitlement. The subtext was clear. They were targeting the backlash against passenger empowerment. But the stunt backfired. Passengers began using the hashtag #EthicsOverExcellence to report stories of bias, downgrades, and silent humiliation. And then, the scandal hit. A journalist from Telltales Investigates published a bombshell. Skylink Airlines quietly erased negative passenger behavior flags, not for ethics, but to boost loyalty scores for premium-paying customers. Internal memos encouraged crew to suppress complaints if the passenger had elite status. The result: GLEI flagged all 3 Skylink member airlines. 740s in loyalty-linked ESG funds were frozen. 2 CEOs resigned within 48 hours. The kicker: an internal whistleblower revealed the software Skylink used had been illegally patched to bypass ethics scoring audits. Renato was in Tokyo when the news broke. His team handed him a physical copy of the report. He scanned it silently, then handed it back. Then turned to Maya and said, "Schedule the Geneva testimony." Days later, under an ornate dome in Switzerland, representatives from 28 countries, 6 NGOs, 7 airline alliances, and 3 global banks gathered. The room was hushed as Renato walked to the microphone. He wasn't flashy. No suit with gold cufflinks, just a navy jacket, white shirt, and a quiet, deliberate step. His opening words were simple. "I didn't build this system to be popular. I built it so people would finally have something stronger than silence." Then came the numbers. Over 2 million dignity-related passenger complaints logged across 3 years. 79% involved first-class or business passengers of color. 92% were dismissed by airline internal review before GLEI was born. He didn't blame anyone directly. He blamed culture. A culture where crew got promoted for protecting the brand instead of correcting injustice. Executives were rewarded for silencing incidents instead of preventing them. Passengers had no appeal when wronged, only a form and a wait list. Then, he made the ask. "I propose that the passenger ethics mandate be enshrined as an international aviation standard, as binding as safety regulations, as transparent as seat maps." After he finished, the moderator said, "Mr. Cruz, there are whispers that some want to nationalize or split control of GLEI. What is your response?" Renato didn't blink. Ethics doesn't need more owners. It needs more courage. That line trended for 2 days. More courage, less control. It was spray-painted on a protest banner in London, printed on T-shirts in Jakarta, worn on hats by frequent flyers in JFK Terminal 7, back in Manila. The Senate Committee on Digital Infrastructure passed what they called the Cruise Clause, a law requiring all airlines operating in the Philippines to submit ethics transparency reports. Tied to GLEI scores, 3 ASEAN nations soon followed. By week's end, Silverjet released a new statement. We acknowledge the structural failures that allow dignity to be traded for profit. We accept full GLEI compliance. We commit to rebuilding trust one flight at a time. Renato didn't comment. He didn't need to. GLEI's public dashboard now showed 13 airlines in compliance, 8 more under review. That night, back in Singapore, Renato stood by the same window he always did. He looked out over the harbor, soft lights, still water, sky bleeding into dawn. Maya walked in. You did it. He shook his head. No, we did it. And we're not done. She raised an eyebrow. What's next? He smiled faintly. What comes after the charter? Enforcement. Not through punishment, but through permanence. And with that, he opened a new folder, the Dignity Enforcement Framework, Draft 1. Because for him, power wasn't about applause. It was about making injustice impossible to ignore. The email subject line read, Lead to autoflag notification. Tier 2 violation, millionaire PHL. Maya opened it first. Her brow furrowed before she even read the body. Renato was across the room, standing quietly near the window of their Singapore office, looking out at the monsoon haze. Ren, she said gently, you need to see this. He turned slowly, as if he already knew something was off. She handed him the iPad. He scanned the screen. Millionaire, a small regional airline out of the Philippines. He knew it well, because 15 years ago, he helped design their original loyalty software. And the CEO, Selena Arguelles, the woman who once meant more to him than anyone else. The violation wasn't violent or headline-worthy, but it was loud in a different way. A grandmother, 72, traveling from Cebu to Manila, was denied wheelchair assistance on landing. Left sitting near Gate 5 for nearly 40 minutes, staff walking past her repeatedly. A first-class passenger had complained that her presence near the premium exit looked messy. The crew moved her without apology. It was caught on a CCTV leak and flagged by a third-party ethics monitor using GLEI's new real-time human dignity protocol. Renato closed the iPad. No emotion, just stillness. Maya waited. You okay? She asked softly. She's not unethical, he finally said. I know, but the system doesn't flag feelings. It flags failures. 2 hours later, GLEI's public dashboard updated. Millionaire, dignity score. 72% flagged. Tier 2, pending compliance review. The news hit local media first. Millionaire, once praised for regional hospitality, now under ethics scrutiny. Then the backlash came in waves, not from critics, but from passengers. Dozens of stories emerged overnight. Flight attendant laughed when my daughter asked for headphones. They told me my seat was too upgraded for someone like me. They asked me to change rows because my oxygen machine made the cabin look uncomfortable. None of them had filed formal complaints before. Now they had a place to tell it all. Renato didn't reach out to Selena. Not at first. He watched from afar. Watched the statements, the delayed apology, the defensive tone in her interviews. She was in over her head. She had inherited a family-owned airline, but she was still learning how to manage power with humility. He knew that because once, long ago, she had told him, my father taught me how to run an airline, but you taught me how to see people. Now, it was time to see what she had become. GLEI policy was clear. Renato couldn't interfere with flagged investigations, especially if there was a personal connection. So, he didn't. But the board sent an independent auditor, a former aviation ethics judge from New Zealand, to Manila. His report came back in 3 days. Blunt, unforgiving. A pattern of soft prejudice exists, largely untrained, but systemic. Cabin crew receive inconsistent guidance on service equity. No tracking mechanisms exist for informal discrimination events. The conclusion: temporary downgrade of Millionaire's international loyalty privileges. All point redemptions on global partners would be suspended for 14 days pending full reforms. For a small airline like Banyan, that was catastrophic. That night, Selena called. He let it ring twice, then picked up. No video, just voice. So, she said, It's really you behind the silence. Renato didn't answer right away. Then, it's not personal, Selena. You know that. I didn't think I'd ever be flagged. Not by your system. Not after everything You weren't flagged. Your choices were silence. Do you even know what this will do to us? I know exactly what it will do. And I also know you're strong enough to fix it. That's easy to say from your tower in Singapore. He almost smiled. It was easy to say when we were building this together too, until it stopped being theoretical. I'm not asking for you to erase it. Good. Because I wouldn't. Pause. Then I'm asking you to help me face it. The next day, Selena did something no other airline CEO had done yet. She held a public town hall, live-streamed, unedited, unfiltered. She stood in front of staff, passengers, critics, media, and said, I grew up in the airline world. I thought warmth was enough. I thought smiling meant serving. But service is about dignity, not decor. And we failed that. Then she announced, every millionaire crew member would complete passenger empathy and visibility training within 30 days. A new system for real-time ethics reflection on every flight. And the appointment of an external dignity compliance officer, hired through GLEI. Renato watched the whole thing on his screen, quiet, then whispered, That's the Selena I remember. Maya stepped into his office. You sure you were okay letting her take the fall like that? She didn't fall. She stood up. By week's end, Banyonaire's score climbed from 72% to 84%. Still under review, but improving. More importantly, no passenger report went unanswered. The industry noticed, fast, and one by one, other small airlines started reaching out. How do we train crew on implicit service bias? Can GLEI help us write our new onboarding manual? Do we need a whistleblower channel or is a feedback loop enough? Renato created a new branch within the system. Dignity Bridge, a transition program for carriers under reform. It would offer anonymous crew surveys, passenger dignity simulations, culture audit mentorship, free of charge, funded from the same reserve GLEI earned after his freeze on $1, 4B worth of loyalty points. That night, Selena sent him one final message, a photo, a passenger, elderly, smiling, being wheeled off a Millionaire jet, holding a thank you card. Her caption, dignity landed with us. Finally, Renato replied with just 4 words. That's the whole point. It was a headline no one expected. UN proposes global ethics standard based on GLEI framework. Across newsrooms in New York, London, Geneva, and Singapore, the story took center stage. A system once quietly born from one man's quiet defiance was now being proposed as the official dignity benchmark for all commercial flights registered under the United Nations International Civil Aviation Network, ICANN. If approved, every airline in the 74 participating countries would be required to meet minimum dignity compliance thresholds, or risk losing international route certification. The world gasped, the industry panicked, and Washington pushed back hard. 3 days later, on Capitol Hill, an emergency hearing was called. The name of the session, Global Ethics Overreach, examining GLEI's threat to American sovereignty in aviation. The tone was clear. Inside room 216 of the Hart Senate office building, a nameplate was placed at the witness table. Renato Cruz, founder, Global Loyalty Ethics Index, GLEI. He'd been invited, no summoned, and the choice was his. Testify and defend everything he built, or let others speak for his legacy. You don't have to do this, Maya said as they stepped into the hallway. He adjusted his tie, simple gray. No branding, no GLEI logo. I do, he replied. Not for them, for everyone who never got a seat at this table. They entered the hearing room. It was packed. Cameras, analysts, airline lobbyists, passengers turned activists. Even foreign diplomats lining the back wall. Renato sat down alone, calm, still, ready. The opening statements weren't kind. Senator Russell Matheson of Texas, funded by 3 major U.S. airline PACs, launched first. Let me be clear, no unelected technocrat, no matter how noble his intentions, gets to dictate how American companies train their flight crews. He waved a printed GLEI audit result. This so-called ethics system flagged a U.S. airline for serving salad without croutons in first class. That's not a dignity crisis. That's lunch. Laughter from a few. Silence from others. Renato didn't flinch. He waited. Then came the harder accusation. Senator Elaine Curran of Florida. Mr. Cruz, your system has frozen over $1. $4 billion in loyalty redemptions. That's not just points. That's trust. You've weaponized inconvenience. How do you defend that? He finally leaned forward, microphone on, voice low, steady, with respect. Senator, trust isn't a perk. It's earned. If a company breaks that trust, we don't call it inconvenience. We call it accountability, a pause. And the points, they weren't lost. They were held until dignity was restored. The room stilled. The chairman leaned in. Mr. Cruz, the UN is about to vote on turning your system into international law. Are you prepared to defend that level of influence? Renato nodded once. I didn't build GLEI for power. I built it because one day, a flight attendant looked at my name, my face, and decided I didn't belong in first class. No one stood up, not even me. He exhaled. That silence haunted me. So I created something that would speak when no one else did. Murmurs in the gallery. Then, an unexpected turn. Senator Valerie Dawson of Illinois, an elder black woman with 30 years in Congress, leaned into her mic. Mr. Cruz, I've read every audit report your system ever filed. It doesn't just flag airlines. It trains them, guides them, rebuilds them. You don't punish, you reform. She locked eyes with Matheson. What I see isn't overreach. I see a reckoning that's long overdue. The room held its breath. During recess, Maya found Renato near the window. You did what you came to do, she whispered. I didn't come to fight, he said. I came to remind them why this matters. She nodded. You reminded me too. By day's end, the hearing transcripts had gone viral, especially one quote. Ethics doesn't need borders, just courage. Renato Cruz. That night, a vote took place, not in Washington, but in Geneva. ICANN Resolution 47A. Formal adoption of the GLEI framework as the International Passenger Dignity Standard. Result: yes, 66. No. 8. Abstain. 0. The motion passed. Unanimously within the EU, unanimously across Southeast Asia. Even nations previously neutral, like Canada, Brazil, and South Africa, voted yes. 2 days later, the UN released a formal statement. As of July 1st, all commercial aviation routes crossing international borders must adhere to GLEI's minimum dignity standards, or be subject to coordinated review and sanction. For the first time in history, human dignity was being regulated alongside airspeed and fuel safety. Back at the GLEI headquarters in Singapore, Renato watched the news in silence. He didn't cheer. He didn't cry. He just whispered to himself. We gave silence a system. That same evening, his inbox pinged. Subject line: New submission, Dignity Reform Pledge. Skylink North America, one of the most defiant U.S. airlines, had quietly folded. They had signed on, committed to full compliance. With it came a personal note from the CEO. You were right. We mistook silence for loyalty. We'll do better. Thank you for not turning your back when you had every right to. By midnight, 3 more pledges came in. By morning, 12. By the end of the week, 46 airlines had opted into early GLEI enforcement before the UN deadline. For the first time in years, airline crew members began receiving not just safety training, but dignity training. How to serve without bias. How to recognize nonverbal distress. How to honor silence as a form of protest. It wasn't fast, it wasn't perfect, but it was real and irreversible. Back in Manila, a mother watched her teenage son board his first solo flight. The same airline that once humiliated her years ago now offered her son a blanket, respect, and a quiet first-class welcome. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Cruz, whoever you are." The breeze in Batangas still carried salt from the sea. Renato hadn't walked these streets in years, not since his mother's funeral. Now, with GLEI spread across continents and international laws signed in Geneva, he was home again, not as a boy with borrowed shoes, but as the architect of a system that had shaken the skies. But he didn't come for applause. He came quietly to visit his mother's grave, and maybe, for the first time, let the weight of everything settle on his shoulders. The tricycle driver recognized him. "You're Sir Renato." "Diba?" The ethics man, the one from the news. Renato gave a polite smile. Just Renato. They passed the old school, his old school. A banner hung from the gates. "Welcome home. Renato Cruz, our pride, our standard." He hadn't expected that. Inside the small auditorium, the mayor stood waiting with the principal, a few reporters, and half the high school faculty. A small brass plaque was covered with cloth. Kids lined the walls with handmade signs. Some said Salamat, Sir. Others just had the letters. GLEI. The principal, Mrs. Navarro, took the mic. This town once sent a quiet boy away on a scholarship. Today, that boy returns as the man whose silence changed an industry. They unveiled the plaque, the Renato Cruz Dignity Fellowship, for students who build, not break. The applause wasn't loud, but it was full. He stood still, didn't wipe his eyes, though they stung. Didn't say much, only thank you for remembering, and for raising me quietly enough to hear what others miss. Later that night, over dinner at a small roadside carinderia, Maya showed him the email. He froze mid-bite. Batangas Air flagged. Tier 2 dignity violation. He blinked twice. "No," he said. But the screen didn't change. A domestic airline. Only 6 planes, operating mostly Luzon-Visayas routes. They had just joined the GLEI program last month. The violation. A 9-year-old boy with a speech impediment had been moved out of the courtesy zone because a premium passenger complained that his stutter made the cabin feel tense. A junior attendant, unsure of protocol, complied. The boy cried in silence the rest of the flight. The family submitted a complaint the next day, and GLEI, following new AI-aided scan protocols, flagged the incident immediately. The CEO of Batangas Air was familiar. Luis Montano, Renato's childhood friend. They had played under mango trees together, shared fish balls and school shoes. Luis had even written his college recommendation letter. And now, Luis's airline was on the public watch and correct list. Renato knew the rules, but this felt different. Too close, too raw. He drove to the Batangas Air hangar the next morning. No press, no formal meeting. Just 2 old friends seated across a battered break room table, with memories between them and a silence they didn't know how to break. Luis went first. "I guess congratulations are in order. You made it into the big leagues." Renato offered a weak smile. "You too. You survived COVID and 3 fuel crises. That's not nothing. And now you're flagging me." "Us. Like some faceless audit firm. I didn't flag you. The system did. You wrote the damn system, Ren, and you agreed to use it." Luis leaned back. "You know that boy's family. They live 2 blocks from your mother's old house. We gave them a flight voucher. Isn't that enough?" Renato's eyes darkened. They didn't want a voucher, Luis. They wanted their son to feel like he mattered. Silence. "Did you at least talk to the crew?" "The girl's only 22. She panicked, thought she was de-escalating. Then train her better. We don't have your budget." "You don't need my budget. You need my standard." That night, Renato walked through his old barangay. Kids played barefoot in the street. A grandmother sold banana Q from a dented cart. Life was the same, yet changed. A small boy ran up to him. "Sir." "You're the airplane man, right?" Renato knelt. "Maybe." "Why do you ask?" The boy smiled. "Because my ate said one day, thanks to you, I'll get to ride a plane and not feel scared to talk." Renato didn't reply. He just hugged him and whispered, "That's the goal, little man. That's always the goal." The next morning, Batangas Air posted a public letter, signed by Luis. Not a denial, not a defense, but a vow. "We failed a child in our care, not because we meant to, but because we weren't ready. Starting today, we train differently, we serve differently, and thanks to GLEI, we finally see it." Within hours, the story spread. The airline's transparency sparked a flood of support from passengers who'd had good experiences, but stayed silent. The dignity score went from 68% to 81% within a week. And the boy's family, they received a personal visit from Luis and a letter signed by the crew member herself. "I'm sorry I made you feel small. You were never the problem. My silence was Renato flew back to Singapore a few days later. Maya met him at the gate. He looked exhausted, but lighter. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Better than okay." For the first time, the system worked where it was born. She smiled. "And did it change you?" He thought for a moment. "It reminded me why we build, not just for the headlines, but for the homecomings." Later that night, he stood alone in the GLEI control room, watching red pins on the global map slowly turn green. One blinked near Batangas, then held steady. He whispered to the quiet, "God, let this hold." And for once, it did. It started with a whisper, then a headline, then a full-on media storm. Exclusive. Whistleblower claims GLEI scores are arbitrary, designed to punish airlines who don't pay. It was everywhere, from tabloid blogs to primetime anchors. By morning, the headlines grew bolder. Ethics for sale. Renato Cruz accused of weaponizing morality. GLEI, the most dangerous system in aviation. And just like that, everything Renato had built felt like it was on trial again. In Singapore, Maya burst into his office with 3 printouts in hand. "You need to see this. Someone just leaked partial audit scores, and they're framing them like pay to play." Renato calmly took the papers. His eyes narrowed as he scanned them. He recognized the data. It wasn't fake, but it was cherry-picked. 4 airlines, all members of the Ether Consortium, a powerful alliance of major carriers across Europe and the U.S., had been quietly resisting GLEI compliance for months. Now they were on offense, trying to bury it before it buried them. By mid-afternoon, a formal congressional probe had been announced in Washington. Senator Matheson, the same critic from the ethics hearing, was leading it. "We will not allow one man's unchecked algorithm to dictate the future of global air travel." Renato stood at the window of the GLEI command center, watching dots blink on a digital world map. Red, green, yellow. The system was still functioning, but the trust, that was harder to measure. Maya turned to him. "You have 2 options. Play defense, release a statement, or go public, fully public." He didn't flinch. "We're not fighting lies with press releases. We fight with transparency." The next morning, Renato called a press conference. Not in Geneva, not in Washington, but in Batangas, where it all started. The media expected denial. Instead, he gave them the system. He opened the GLEI audit portal live on screen, showed every rule, every weight, every line of code behind every dignity score. "Nothing is hidden," he said, "because accountability should never hide behind convenience." Then he dropped the final blow. "As of today, GLEI is now open source. Anyone can review it. Anyone can build on it. Because dignity isn't my product. It's a right." The crowd was stunned. Within 6 hours, 3 independent aviation analysts confirmed the leaked audits were accurate, but the interpretation was deliberately misleading. By end of day, the supposed whistleblower was exposed, a paid consultant for Ether Consortium's crisis management firm. The smear unraveled, and GLEI, it didn't just survive, it grew stronger. Later that night, Maya looked at him across a small cafe table back in Singapore. "You just handed your life's work to the world. You okay with that?" Renato nodded. "It was never mine to keep." She paused. "Then what now?" He smiled faintly. "Now we start the part no one ever expects. Maintenance. Because even dignity needs updates." Outside, the air smelled of rain. The storm had passed, but Renato knew storms always return. He just had to make sure the roof would hold. The email arrived with no fanfare. Subject line: Recommendation for Presidential Medal of Civilian Honor, Renato Cruz. It came with a request. Would he attend the formal state ceremony in Washington, D.C., where the president would personally award him for services to global ethics, aviation safety, and the restoration of passenger dignity? Maya read it out loud. Renato didn't respond immediately. He just turned back to the window of his office. The Manila branch of GLEI now overlooked the very streets he grew up walking. "So," she finally asked. He exhaled. "Do I need a medal to say it mattered?" She smiled gently. "No, but the world thinks you do." That same week, he received another letter. This one was handwritten from the International Aviation Education Board. They had voted unanimously to integrate the GLEI framework into the global training curriculum for flight attendants, pilots, and ground crew, effective next academic year. The final module would be titled Cruise Protocol, Understanding Passenger Dignity Through Silence, Not Status. He stared at the paper for a long time. No applause, no headlines, but something deeper, something that felt final. 3 days before the medal ceremony, he made a quiet trip back to the hillside cemetery in Batangas. No cameras, no press, just a single white rose in his hand, and a man carrying the weight of a changed world. He sat beside his mother's grave and whispered, "I got invited to the White House." "Ma," he chuckled. "Can you believe it? Me, the kid who used to sell lumpia for bus fare." His voice softened. "But I don't want a medal, not really. I want people to sit down, be quiet, and still be respected." He looked up at the clouds. "You were the first person to teach me that. So if anyone deserves a medal, it's you." He placed the rose gently on the headstone. "This is your ceremony." That night, Maya found him in the office, writing a letter. "You're really not going." He shook his head. "They can keep the podium. I have better places to stand." Instead, he asked the president's office to redirect the funds meant for the state ceremony into something else. A scholarship fund for rural aviation students in Southeast Asia, a grant to develop AI-based inclusion tools for passengers with invisible disabilities, a permanent dignity audit bureau inside the ICAO, and one final request: rename the award. Call it the Rosa Cruz Honor, for people whose silence changed systems. The president agreed, unanimously. 6 months later, at a modest ceremony in Geneva, a young flight attendant from Côte d'Ivoire became the first recipient of the Rosa Cruz Honor. She had anonymously reported abuse within her airline's training program and helped rebuild it from the inside. Renato wasn't there. He didn't need to be. Her story was his answer. Back in Manila, he walked through Ninoy Aquino Airport on a quiet morning. No one recognized him, but he noticed something new. A sign near Gate 9. Courtesy Zone, Passenger Dignity Checkpoint. If you feel unseen, unheard, or unsafe, scan here. It was part of GLEI's new nonverbal ethics feedback system. Live, real-time, global. A system that didn't wait for complaints, it listened. To silence, a young agent approached an elderly woman struggling with her luggage. No one told her to. She just noticed and acted. Renato paused, watched, smiled, then kept walking. He didn't need a medal, because dignity didn't require noise. Just a system that remembered the quiet, and a world finally learning how to listen. Have you ever been treated unfairly just because you stayed silent? Tell us your story in the comments, or just tell us where you're watching from. Someone like Renato Cruz might be listening.